Welcome back. Well, former top economic officials are now urging the Supreme Court not to allow President Trump to fire Lisa Cook. The letter from former Fed chairs Alan Greenspan, Ben Bernanke, former Treasury Secretaries Larry Summers and Janet Yellen write that her firing, quote, would expose the Federal Reserve to political influences, thereby eroding public confidence in the Fed's independence and jeopardizing the credibility and efficacy of U.S. monetary policy. Lisa Cook's attorney write this: the president's stay application asks the court to act on an emergency basis to eviscerate the independence of the Federal Reserve Board. Joining me now is U.S. Federal Housing Finance Agency Director William Pulte. William, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Your reaction to that letter from the former executives?
Well, look, lawyers are going to say what lawyers are going to say. People are going to try to spin it 8 ways to Sunday. At the end of the day, we can't have mortgage fraud in this country. President Trump has shown time and time again we need to get housing costs down, and we're working very hard on that. We've made great progress. President Trump has crushed inflation. But as it relates to the Federal Reserve, we can't have somebody who's been credibly accused of mortgage fraud at the Federal Reserve. Ironically, that's actually what makes the Federal Reserve not independent, is when we can't call them out balls and strikes and say we shouldn't have somebody like this sitting in a Fed governor's seat.
Well, look, the New York Times is reporting that you were pressuring Trump to fire Eric Siebert, the U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, and replace him with a prosecutor who would be willing to bring charges against Letitia James, among others. Your reaction to that?
Well, nobody presses President Trump. President Trump presses other people. So I would say I don't want to comment about anything that I ever say to the president or not. That's my standard line. I would say, however, that the president deserves good U.S. attorneys. He deserves people who are going to call balls and strikes by the law. And I'd say this, too. There's so much spin out there, Maria, with regard to Lisa Cook or Letitia James. At the end of the day, we are focused as mortgage people on mortgage fraud. And if we see mortgage fraud, we don't care who you are. We're going to call it out, and we're not going to be intimidated by the spin or by leaks or by all this other nonsense that people try to do to attack us.
All right. I want to switch gears, ask you about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Our viewers want real information. A lot of people were emailing me and reaching out to me to try to better understand what you all are trying to do. And I asked Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent about it yesterday, the White House's next steps in taking a portion of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac public. Here's what the Secretary told me. Watch. A lot of viewers want to hear about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
I can tell you that we are moving forward, but in a very deliberate fashion. The IPO is important. So as we are negotiating this sale of a government stake, we want a fair price, a good price for the taxpayer, because this is going to be a lot of money for Treasury. But the most important thing here is that mortgage rates stay benign or even get better for American people, because we're in this housing affordability crisis. We talked about it. I think the Fed lowering rates will bring it down.
So, William, what can you tell us? I know you want to take between 3 and 6% of those companies, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, public in an IPO later this year.
He's right. And Secretary Lutnick, Secretary Bessent, and I are working on some options. Ultimately, it will be up to the president. You may remember that the president turned down an offer to basically have the company sold for $100+ billion. Today, I believe that valuation is $500 to $700 billion, maybe even eventually up towards $1 trillion. So President Trump made the right decision in the first term to say, no, thank you. I think it will be very oversubscribed if and when the president decides to do something. It'll be the biggest IPO in history. And Secretary Bessent is right. We want interest rates to come down. Since the president has come into office, he's lowered mortgage rates. You can see, when he started out, it's already down. And then on top of that, Maria, refinancings are through the roof. So President Trump has really been able to get this housing market off of the ground, which it was basically dead. Biden had killed the housing market, and slowly but surely we're resuscitating it. And I'm very confident that we're going to get this housing market back and booming in the coming years.
Yeah, I mean, we want to see mortgage rates come down, but rates actually went up for the first time since July. The 30-year fixed rate sitting at 6.3%. I spoke with Federal Reserve Board Governor Stephen Myron yesterday. He said mortgage rates should come down as the Fed cuts more. Listen to this.
The long-term rate response to last week's cut has actually been relatively muted and reversed somewhat in the last couple of days. But I would expect mortgage rates to come down as the Fed continues cutting interest rates. The risk at hand is that, if I'm right that population growth shocks due to changes in border policy are major drivers of things that go into monetary policy, and if I'm right that rent inflation is going to be coming down, and if I'm right that tariffs are not going to have a material increase on inflation, and to me, thus far, there's little evidence that that's the case.
But, William, when we see the Fed cut rates, I mean, recently, even the expectation that we're going to see a string of rate cuts, actually, rates went up. The 10-year now at 4.11%.
Well, I think mortgage rates will go down. And look, at the end of the day, it's inflation. And President Trump came in, and boy, did we have a problem under Biden with inflation. He has crushed inflation. And you can see it even in the mortgage rate data. Look at when he started. He crushed inflation. Mortgage rates went down. So I think you're going to continue to see that. Our country is richer than ever before thanks to the tariffs. If we can get the Federal Reserve to just call balls and strikes, be apolitical, Maria. They lowered interest rates right before the election, and now they're keeping interest rates way high when President Trump has crushed inflation. So we need the rates to come down for the housing market to free up. As I said, we see refinancings. People are finally able to get liquidity out of their homes, and I think that's only going to increase over President Trump's turn.
Yeah, I always laugh when, they say, whatever President Trump says is impacting the independence of the Federal Reserve. Well, how about when Jay Powell first took over? One of the first things he did was put in all these new rules about DEI, about climate change at the Fed, right? And then,
why
as you
hasn't
say,
he called for an investigation? Well, why hasn't he called for an investigation into Lisa Cook, for example? Why isn't he saying mortgage fraud shouldn't be something that a Federal Reserve governor has? So these are all the things. It's a shame that it has to come from the president. It should really have to come from the Federal Reserve chair. Again, we call balls and strikes. If we see mortgage fraud, we're going to report it, and it needs to be taken seriously. There cannot be mortgage fraud in this country.
Now, you've also suggested that there was mortgage fraud having to do with Adam Schiff. As we today report all about Jim Comey and this indictment, and we remember Adam Schiff on all those TV shows saying that there was Russia collusion in plain sight. Where are you in that investigation? I haven't heard about Adam Schiff recently.
Well, I don't want to comment on anything other than what's in our referral letter and what's been made public by Mr. Schiff and his attorneys. But I would say that, generally speaking, you cannot have two residences at the same time. And he made a lot of different things, primary residences, that is. And he made a lot of different statements that I believe are very conflicting in nature. He's a U.S. senator. I believe he's a lawyer. This is supposed to be somebody who's very smart, very sophisticated. He knew what he was doing, in our view, in our opinion, and that will ultimately be up to the DOJ. I have very good confidence in the Attorney General and in President Trump in terms of the DOJ, so I'd refer you to them on any specific thing. But I just want to say it's been very disheartening, Maria. You see people even in the Miss James case say, oh, well, it was just one power of attorney. No. Wishful thinking. You look at the secondary residence in Virginia that she claimed on top of claiming a primary residence in Virginia. She's the Attorney General in New York. She claimed a secondary residence, and we believe that she doesn't even live there. She doesn't even use that home, we believe. So then she's got this whole problem with her properties in New York. So stay tuned on that. Look, I have nothing against these people. I think what they did, obviously, to the president was wrong. But they did, in our opinion, commit mortgage fraud, and we have an obligation to report it. Frankly, I wouldn't be doing my job, Maria, if I didn't report it.
And when will we hear more about the Letitia James case?
I would refer you to the DOJ on anything outside of mortgage fraud.
Okay,
so
and in
that will be up to them.
Yeah, and in terms of this deal, the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac deals, have you decided on which bank will be the lead banker on this? It's going to be an enormous piece of business. I know all of Wall Street wants it.
Again, I don't decide, and neither do the secretaries. That's the president who decides. He has not made any decisions on which banks will do it. I will tell you, our phones are ringing off the hook. The president understands deals better than anyone. He turned down $100 billion. Turns out that was the right case because this is going to be worth trillions, I believe, one day. The president will make the decision on his own timeline. And I think no matter what happens, it will be the right decision. And if he does make the decision to do it, Maria, it'll be the hottest IPO in history, the biggest IPO in history. And I believe it will be grossly oversubscribed.
And I know that there are a lot of different ways to do it, right? I mean, and that's what Wall Street firms are coming to the president and putting their plans forth. Is the idea to have one lead bank and then several others involved below that first lead?
I think so. I think there would probably be one or two. That'll be up to the president. And then we have a host of banks that want to do it. I mean, everybody's calling, frankly. People are calling from across the world wanting to invest in it. And look, Maria, that's a lot. The mortgage fraud gets a lot of headlines. But I think we've been the most consequential administration and directorship at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac because the president finally cares about these assets. We've gone in. We got rent to be counted towards your mortgage. We added cryptocurrency. We laid off over 1,000 people, not because we want to lay people off, but because we want to right-size the organization. We have got these businesses back and humming like real businesses. They're focused on ROE. I mean, these are business terms. They've never even heard of these things in these organizations. So, frankly, I'm very optimistic for Fannie and Freddie. The future is very bright, and ultimately the president will make the best decision. But in the meantime, we're going to make lots and lots of cash at Fannie and Freddie.
All right, we will be watching that. William, thank you. William Pulte at the White House this morning. We will see you soon. We'll be right back.